It's said that we're better united than divided. And this week on Full Frame, some of the world's brightest minds discuss the importance of coming together and how human connections make a difference. I'm Mike Walter, coming to you from the heart of New York City's Times Square. Let's take it full frame. Parag Khanna is an accomplished traveler and world explorer. Born in India, he's visited 100 countries on all continents. His keen insight on the world we live in is one of the reasons he's a senior research fellow in the Center on Asia and Globalization at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. He's a best-selling author whose recent book, Connectography, Mapping the Future of Global Civilization, explores megacities, emerging global networks, and the shifting power dynamics of our planet. I sat down with him at the Aspen Ideas Festival, one of the largest annual gatherings of thought leaders and innovators, and had a conversation about the crucial nature of connecting. Take a look. You were on a panel earlier today, and I wanted to use the words of the moderator because I thought it was really interesting how he described what you're talking about. A rewiring of governance, nation states not as important as hubs. And I've seen you make this argument that if you get too focused on within your borders, that you're missing out on opportunities. And I think the example you gave is, what if you looked at a hub at Toronto down through Detroit, that if you were in Michigan and you looked at it that way instead of inside your borders, you might be able to revive a city like Detroit.
So there's a perfect example of a rewiring that's missing, because I'm talking about the need for a Chicago-Toronto corridor with Detroit in the middle, but that corridor doesn't exist. So that's the problem, because you see an opportunity for there to be a new wiring, a new infrastructure, a new connectivity across the border that would benefit everyone along that corridor on both sides of the border. But it doesn't exist yet, and whenever I see those opportunities, those missed opportunities, especially in that case, because as you know, in that example, Canada has offered to subsidize the entire Ambassador Bridge that would serve as a second major artery for the most heavily transited border in the world, the most important and voluminous trade relationship on earth. And Canada's offering us to build the bridge, and we're not moving forward with it for our own political reasons and bureaucracy. So that's maddening. But to David's point about the rewiring of the world, it's the rewiring that is happening. Governments have made it happen. They've been investing in it. Companies have made it happen. Everyone, it's our collective activity. Globalization is the sum total of everything that we do, not just governments.
Some people hear what you say and embrace it, and yet there still is this element in society, and maybe you can talk about this, that really they don't want any part of this. It frightens them. And you have a candidate, Donald Trump, who says, I'm going to erect a wall. They like that. This is additional borders. What is it that frightens people about what you're talking about?
So Donald Trump was just celebrating the opening of his newest golf course, or some old golf course in Scotland. The guy has assets around the world. You cannot tell me that he doesn't favor globalization. You almost don't even have a right to oppose globalization intellectually, because as a fact, it has elevated everyone's standard of living as a whole. Not just their, per capita income, because we know wages haven't grown, but there's so many things about the problems of inequality in American society where we blame globalization, we blame China, we blame Mexico, we blame everyone but ourselves, everyone but bad politics and bad policy. Meanwhile, for the last 15, 20 years, when other countries have seen jobs being outsourced and lost, they have retrained their workers, they have invested, they have forced companies to invest locally and move people up the value chain. We didn't do that. It's our fault. It's not Mexico's fault. It is, in fact, our fault. So, yes, people have a right to be populist, to be nativist, to be angry, but they should be directing their anger at Washington, at Wall Street, whatever the case may be. But you can't really blame the foreign partners, your trade partners, your largest trade partners, who you voted for governments to sign these agreements with. And we are a democratic society, so we should blame our own ignorance on top of everything else. It is certainly true that there is a lot of unfair aspects of trade deals. Some dimensions of trade deals never should have gone forward. But you don't just say, I'm going to rip up the trade deal. We live in a world of reciprocity. So whether your name is Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, it is very, very self-defeating to rock the sort of, the system as much as they talk about doing. Fortunately, I actually have faith in the democratic system to some degree, and I believe that historically, no matter what people say when they're campaigning, when they get elected, they tend to moderate their positions.
So you talk about cities as always being there, always vitally important. Nation states, not so much so. Talk to us about that.
Right. Well, cities are what I call today the islands of stability or the islands of governance. Many cities around the world have become the magnetic hubs for the world economy, for talent. Most of the world population now lives in cities. And in fact, what has always been the case is that cities are our fundamental social and infrastructural unit. They are thousands of years old. Our first sort of urban habitats were developed 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. Over that last, those millennia, empires have risen and fallen, nations come and go, the city is always there. And today the city is larger and more powerful than ever. There are 50 megacities that more or less dominate the world economy, 600 cities in total that are far more powerful. You can't have a successful country without successful cities. So we should really think of ourselves as a network civilization among cities that drive the world economy. No matter what country you may or may not belong to. And there's a lot of evidence for this. Another data point just being the fact that there are cities that are really capitals of entire regions, like Lagos, Nigeria, or Nairobi in Kenya. These are not just national capitals. Lagos isn't even the capital of Nigeria anyway. These are entire regional hubs. The entire economy of many countries depends on one city. Singapore in Southeast Asia is the smallest country geographically in Southeast Asia, but the wealthiest country. Almost 75% of the foreign investment that goes into the ASEAN region of 700 million people is routed through a tiny little island of 5 million people. So you can't just say that, oh, well, that's just a little dot. If you look at the role that a place plays in global flows and connectivity, then your measurement of its power would be far more significant than simply looking at its territorial size. And that's the shift we're going into today.
Let me, I want to touch on one thing that you say. Forces of connection will overwhelm the forces of division. And yet it seems as though we see example after example of division in the news, that migrants moving, you see the Brexit vote, we've already talked about Donald Trump. How does it overwhelm it?
Mm-hmm. Well, because it already has. The phenomena you're describing are responses to the overwhelming flows and connectivity that we've had. 1 million migrants entered Europe last year and are now residing in Europe. So if there is a movement to slow down the flow of immigrants, that does not mean that friction has won. It means that friction is trying to reassert itself in light of massive, overwhelming volumes of flows. And by the way, that's a good thing. I never said that I'm for, again, a borderless world or for unfettered migration. That doesn't make any sense. These countries, especially the smaller ones, are having a very hard time coping. Let them slow down. Let them figure out where they're going to house migrants, how they're going to employ them, what their strategies are. They're very slow at doing that. This has caught them off guard. So I think that some degree of friction is a very good thing.
As a world traveler, as a guy who's been out there watching all of this, mapping it all out, when it comes to connectivity, as you look at the landscape, who's getting it right?
Well, cities, for sure. So cities, in this day and age, in classical geopolitics, it's all about territorial expansion, right? Today, I argue it's about infrastructure and supply chain control and market access. China doesn't really want to be any bigger. It doesn't want more mouths to feed. It has 1.5 billion people, right? So it's not about expanding your size. It's about controlling market access and making sure that you're absorbing sufficient resources and capital to care for your population. On the city scale, it's a lot easier. You have fewer people, and you have lots of flows of capital coming in. So smaller places, or places that are lucky enough to already be small, have a kind of good fortune that we never appreciated in the Cold War or in previous geopolitical eras, because we had it's a very dangerous situation to be small and weak. You could be conquered. But now it's sort of countries like Switzerland, like Singapore, or city-statelets like Dubai. We say, well, they're actually really lucky. They don't have that many mouths to feed. They have open economies. They're bringing in lots of money. It's less stuff to have to deal with and juggle. So those places are actually rather fortunate, provided that they're well governed. And the thing is that cities learn from other cities faster than countries are learning from other countries. So cities are looking at what Dubai and Singapore do, is saying, what are the 10 things that city is doing that I can do in the next 6 months? And I'm going to go there, study it, learn it, and go do it. And that's why cities are the engines of progress.
So reorganizing the United States of America into the United States of America, how would that look?
Right. So first and foremost, that idea is a layering of what America already is, which is natural, organic, economic gravities of food production, of energy, of our historical centers of manufacturing, of our strong areas for services and capital, right? These are the either rural or resource-rich or urban clusters that need to be better connected to each other so that the bounty of America can be better shared across America. What's the point of sharing a country if you can't share the resources across it because the infrastructure is so bad? So I emphasize the fact that the urban centers should be connected to each other and the resources should be better connected, and you can only do that through better transportation corridors, energy corridors, and so forth. The most important thing to point out is that a lot of people view that approach to remapping America as neglecting the forgotten rural populations or the second-tier populations. To the contrary, I would like to know what you will do for the people of Appalachia or the people of South Dakota or the people of Nebraska, if not what I am describing. How will you help them if you are not going to build that connectivity that passes through their geography so they can benefit from it? So the map that I've put forward in the book is really meant to benefit the people of the second-tier towns of Ohio and the people of Idaho. They're the ones who are going to win. The cities are already winning. So I just want to be clear that this is a map for all Americans, even if I'm calling it the United City-States of America. I'm calling it that because the main connective arteries are connecting the major cities.
You just got back, in fact, you just came in from China.
Yeah.
This message that you have, I would imagine, is very well received there. It seems to me China has a different kind of more outward-looking view with the Belt and Road Initiative, the Silk Road Initiative. It seems as though they kind of get it, and the borders don't seem to matter. We've got to move around. We're all interconnected. What are your thoughts?
So China is benefiting from more and more connectivity. It was a very poor country. It opens its economy. It brought in global supply chains, built up huge trade surpluses and currency reserves. Now it's a capital exporter. All of these things show that China has benefited from the recent decades of globalization. Now it wants to expand its sort of pathways outward physically through this infrastructure, through the One Belt, One Road Initiative, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. It's perfectly logical from a geopolitical standpoint because China has 14 neighbors, more than any country in the world. Does it want to fight a war with any of those neighbors? No. So how is it going to gain influence over them? How is it going to gain access to not only to their markets, but the markets lying to the west of those markets, stretching all the way to Europe? It has to do so through infrastructure. So the One Belt, One Road is actually brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
So are other countries at a disadvantage because they don't seem to get it, do you think, that they're not as aggressive?
Well, there's intellectual shortcomings, there's wealth shortcomings, there's geographical shortcomings, right? When you say get it, actually, I could say it in two senses of the term. There are countries that just aren't getting the infrastructure and the resources because they're still landlocked. China is doing a lot to actually reach those countries and connect them with fiber optic cables, with railways stretching into Central Africa, for example. But then there's the intellectual approach, which is very significant for us right now in an election year where we're still using the language of containing China and so forth. Well, we're doing the right thing by having a military presence in East Asia that reinforces the idea of military stability and balance. What we need to do beyond that is to encourage the countries in the region to form their own security apparatus, their own regional peacemaking agreements for the preservation of their own stability so that their economies can grow. But you cannot contain the One Belt, One Road. Right? It is a terrestrial project, and America is on the other side of the planet, separated from Eurasia by two oceans. Nor should you want to. My challenge to anyone in Washington today is, why did you oppose European countries joining the Asia Infrastructure and Investment Bank? Infrastructure is a global public good. Most of the world's countries were born after 1945. They're post-colonial countries. They are small, they are poor, they are weak, they have dilapidated infrastructure. Their populations have doubled or tripled in the last 50 or 60 years. The one thing they need desperately more than anything else in the world is infrastructure. In fact, many of them view it as more important than our provision of security to them or for them, or on par. And we intellectually failed to grasp that. So we tried to encourage our allies not to join this institution. But of course they did. Every single one of them turned their back on the Obama administration and joined this bank. And now they're launching projects all over. Just new projects have been announced. Housing in Indonesia, power projects in Bangladesh, roads in Tajikistan, a road corridor in Pakistan. Why would you oppose these things? These are desperately poor countries. What are we doing for them that could possibly substitute for what this bank is going to do? Absolutely nothing.
So the future's here. You can either fear it or embrace it.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll find out how shattering cultural myths and misconceptions fosters understanding. It's said that communication and compassion are key to successful relationships, and no one knows that more than Chris Plutt. One of the original founders of the international nonprofit Global Nomads Group, his organization works to foster dialogue and understanding among the world's youth. Global Nomads empowers students worldwide using classroom curriculum and innovative technologies to serve as a driving force for awareness, breaking the barriers of cultural misconceptions and providing a heightened appreciation and comprehension of the world. I sat down with Chris at the Aspen Ideas Festival to talk about the challenges of bringing people together and the importance of cross-cultural exchange, connection, and global student engagement, not only to benefit education, but for diplomacy and the global economy as well. Education and travel are kind of combined in what you do, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But I want to talk about Bosnia, because it's not a place that something you've gone on to,
Right.
and yet it was a place you were taken to
Right.
through the stories from somebody else. So talk to me about that, because that again also leads this pathway to where you are today.
Sure. So I had in college, I didn't go to school in America. I went to school in France. It's the American University Paris, and when I was in school there, my best friend, he was a UN peacekeeper, and it was around the conflict in Bosnia. And he was also Swedish, and he would share stories, not in detail, because I think they're very personal stories, but I had a sense of what that conflict was like by being friends with him. And I think, it's just kind of a way of, as an American living in Paris with a Swedish friend and learning about the conflict in Bosnia, for me, that got me very excited about learning.
I see ideas a lot of times as seeds. You plant them, you water them, you nurture them. The initial stages, did you see when you started this, the vision of what you see today? Did you see that? Could you clearly see it? Or were there fits and starts along the way?
There were certainly fits and starts along the way. I think something that I'm very proud of is the mission of our organization hasn't changed. It's to foster dialogue and understanding amongst the world's youth, and it just hasn't changed. So our ethos as an organization has always been there, and I think will continue to be there. I think when we started the organization, it was a nice thing to have, a nice thing for students to be able to be global citizens. I don't even know if they used that word then. Now I'm at a place where I think that it is critical that every young person has a meaningful cross-cultural exchange as part of their education, and that those exchanges develop global citizenship, that those are skills and tools that are needed for everyone right now if we're going to be successful as, in humanity.
How do you define a global citizen, and how important is it? How important is it today? How important is it 10 years from now?
Mm-hmm. So we define a global citizen who is, aware, curious, and looking to take action in their own way, however they define that at a global scale.
It's remarkable, though. I've seen some of the clips online where a child in Rwanda can talk about the genocide, and a child in the United States who may never be exposed to it is exposed to it in a much different way than in a book. Much more visceral, much more impactful. Talk to us about some of the things you've seen that, put a smile on your face at the end of the day.
Yeah, a smile on my face.
Or bring tears to your eyes is probably better.
Tears often. You know, I mean, we just, as an organization, we went where we thought there were stories that needed to be heard to the American young people. So if you look at our work, we were in Iraq under Saddam Hussein's regime, and we were linking students in Iraq with students in the United States. Nobody was talking to each other then. So the fact that we were making these video links between these young people was pretty extraordinary. And I know, because I know those same students today, that they had a different experience living through that war, you know, as an American and as an Iraqi, because they had humanized each other prior to the conflict starting. And we've seen extraordinary results of our programs where people are willing to engage with people who are different than them, curious, feeling responsible to share what they've learned from different conflicts with larger communities, with their families, with their friends. You know, we were in Darfur. We've been in Somalia. We've been in Afghanistan, Pakistan. We've gone to places where most people don't go, but where we've identified places that we can actually take technology and create connections and create conversations that otherwise wouldn't be had, and where we think these conversations are so critical to break down stereotypes, and in a small way, you know, contribute to world peace.
How does it change these kids? Because it's interesting, the dialogue that's going on, but they're saying stuff afterwards, like, "Oh my God, I never had any idea." What are some of the things you hear afterwards from these kids?
It really. We hear a bunch of things. We hear young people who are curious to travel themselves. We hear about how they have empathy and compassion for people who are different, being willing to engage with people in their community that they didn't engage with in the past, and to at times enter a conversation and correct people on social issues that they've learned about firsthand. So I think that's what we see. Yeah, and I think something recently that I've seen, which I'm really excited about, is how we were focusing a lot of our work in rural America, and to see young students there become global citizens and not have to leave their community. To really, I think we see a brain drain in rural communities, and I think programs like Global Nomads Group contribute to more of a brain gain with 21st century workforce readiness skills, you know, so that they can compete and work with people from different countries and cultures. That's something I'm really proud about as well.
So overhearing this conversation, getting involved, diving in, creating this business, moving forward with it, you have to be forward thinking, and I know virtual reality is now a piece of this. Talk to me about that. Sure.
You know, I think we as an organization are really focusing on what comes out of this. You know, after you've participated in our program, what's the results, and how are you becoming a global citizen, and what is a global citizen? That's what we're really focused on, and then we design based from that. So we have been experimenting with virtual reality and blending virtual reality with virtual exchanges, and we design a lot of curriculum, and we have other tools in which we activate so that young people can become global citizens. And virtual reality is a pretty extraordinary tool. So we've been focusing a lot on the Syria conflict or crisis specifically, and blending virtual reality where students in the United States have been able to walk in the shoes of a young Syrian refugee, and then we connect them with Syrian refugees who are living either in Lebanon or Jordan to talk about the conflict. But from what we find a lot in the States is the conflicts in the Middle East or in that region, they get muddled for Americans. You know, it's all just kind of one big mess. For a lot of people see it that way, but it's not. It's very different. There's very different things going on there. And I think through our programs, by blending virtual reality and virtual exchanges, we're able to give students a real insight on what's happening in that region. And I should also say, it's not just one way. I mean, I'm sharing you very much through an American lens. Our work looks very different in the Middle East, but I would like to think that it's just as powerful and meaningful for those students as it is for the American students.
Let's dive into your head for a minute, because I'm wondering how you think each day. I mean, is it part, we got to focus on virtual reality, we've got to do this and that with this technology, or is it equal parts that and you're devouring the newspaper, oh, this is a horrible place, something terrible is going on there, wouldn't it be great if these kids could learn what life is like for the, I mean, is it equal parts, or how does each day shape up?
I mean, I spend a lot of my time thinking about how this can be the norm for every American young person. You know, when I think about the future, I want to see a day that every 10th grader in the state of Kentucky is linked to a 10th grader in Cairo, Egypt for a 12-week program developing global citizenship. Like, that's what I want to see. So I spend a lot of my time trying to figure out how to do that. You know, how do you get into educational systems, and how do you advocate and get superintendents and principals and teachers to realize how important this is, and to give them the tools to be successful in teaching students these power skills of global citizenship.
And the interesting thing is that 10th grader could one day be the ambassador and have a much deeper understanding of Cairo, Egypt. Let me talk to you about Search for Common Ground, your experience with that, and how did that help shape who you are today?
Right. Search for Common Ground is a conflict transformation organization. I think probably one of the larger organizations in the world that does conflict transformation work. And I had the chance to work with them for 2 years. I led their Rwanda office and then worked on programming in the region between Burundi and Congo. I'm a huge fan of their work. I think it is so critically important to give folks tools on how to mitigate conflicts nonviolently. You know, and it was an interesting place to work. Rwanda post-genocide, there's lots of regional conflicts. I really can't speak highly enough about the organization. Another thing I think I've learned from Search is how important it is to involve the local communities in which you're working. You know, when I was at Search in Rwanda, I was, I think, the only international on my team. You know, it was about it being Rwandan led and driven, and you know, I have so much respect that is a core value of Search's work.
Young people are communicating with each other, and a lot of these issues stem from a lack of communication, a lack of understanding people in different shoes in different places in the world. If people have a dialogue and a better understanding of somebody who lives in another part of the world, maybe those stereotypes that we have start to crumble.
Yeah, no, I certainly believe that. You know, I mean, what we're doing it's not really brain science. You know, like we've been communicating forever as individuals, and you know, we live at this time where we can communicate with people not just in front of us, but people who live thousands of miles away. And I'm a true believer that programs like Global Nomads Group can develop empathy for people who are different than you. You know, I constantly thinking about what happened in Turkey. You know, the reaction that I heard when that bombing happened at the airport, I was crushed. You know, I was literally crushed when I heard that happen. And it's because I know I have Turkish friends. You know, people that I cared deeply for live in that country and could have been in harm's way. I don't know if I would have had that same reaction if I didn't have Turkish friends. You know, but I think programs like Global Nomads Group can develop these, you know, friends that you might not think that you would have in life, and through that making more compassionate and empathetic, and you know, and hopefully we can be just a bit more of a global tribe than individual tribes.
We'll leave it there. Chris, thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Coming up, the science and psychology that influence love and relationships. Love, lust, relationships, books and songs have been written about all three. But if you want to really know about them, you should spend some time with biological anthropologist Dr. Helen Fisher. And we did. You could say she's written the book on love, but that would be an understatement. She's actually written 6 books examining subjects like the evolution, biology, and psychology of human sexuality, to the neurochemistry of romantic love and why we fall in love with one person rather than another. Dr. Fisher has also examined marriage and divorce in over 80 societies, adultery in more than 42 cultures, patterns on monogamy and desertion in birds and mammals, and gender differences in the brain and behavior. Her best-selling, recently revised and updated book, The Anatomy of Love, is a contemporary classic of love and the brain, and her 2 TED Talks about human connections have been viewed over 12 million times. I recently sat down with Dr. Fisher at the Aspen Ideas Festival to speak more about why and how we connect with one another and the intricacies of human relationships.
So I want to talk to you about your beginning. How did you go into this? How did you think? How do you think now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I lie in bed at night and wonder what I think now that I will not believe in 5 years. I'm constantly wondering whether I've got it right. And I think that that's important. How did I get into it? I wish I had a sexy answer to that. But basically, I'm an identical twin. And as an identical twin, by the time you're 4, 5, 6, 7, everybody's asking you, do you have the same cavities in your teeth? Do you have the same friends? Do you like the same food? So long before I knew there was a nature-nurture controversy, I knew there was biology to behavior. And then because in my day in graduate school, they still believed that the mind was an empty slate on which environment just inscribed personality. And I knew that wasn't true. And so I thought to myself, if there's any part of human behavior that would have a biological origin, it would be our mating strategy, because that's what gives you the babies and passes on your DNA. So I thought to myself, okay, we're a pair bonding animal. There must be reasons why we evolve this, why we fall in love, why we feel attached, why we break up and form new attachments to other people. So I was led into it just because I was so interested in human nature. So many anthropologists are interested in why we're all different. I'm interested in why we're all alike.
Talk to me about MRIs, because I was sitting in on your session today, and I think it's fascinating, because back in the day, probably when you first started this, the thought of actually getting inside the brain and looking at it wasn't there for you.
I remember the moment that I decided to put people in brain scanners. I was walking along in Greenwich Village in New York, and I thought to myself, I wonder if we have evolved 3 distinctly different brain systems for mating and reproduction. Sex drive, feelings of intense romantic love, and feelings of deep attachment. And that these 3 brain systems in myriad different ways orchestrate all kinds of love. And then I thought to myself, well, Helen, you've really studied a lot of the sex drive already, and we all know that's in the brain. And I studied a lot of the attachment. So I said, I think it would be great to put people in an MRI machine and try to understand the basic brain patterns. The basic brain region that is associated with intense feelings of romantic love. It lies way below the cortex, where you do your thinking, way below the limbic system associated with your emotions, in basic brain regions linked with drive, with focus, with craving, with energy, with wanting, and with motivation. The motivation to win life's greatest prize. And in fact, people say, in our techie, high-tech age, this is going to disappear. Malarkey. That's absurd. The basic brain region that becomes activated when you're madly in love with somebody lies right next to brain regions for thirst and hunger. We're not going to get rid of thirst. We're not going to get rid of hunger. And if we survive as a species 1 million years from now, we're going to still fall in love.
Let's talk a little bit about technology, because I never thought of this until this session today, that this is a 24/7 singles bar, is how someone described it. And then you talked about the car, which I'd never thought of this either. Tell us what your thoughts are about cars and about technology and how that changes things.
Well, every single time there's new technology, everybody panics. It's called the negativity bias. You always think we're going to hell in a handbasket. And I began to think, now, first of all, this is ridiculous. modern technology is changing how we court. I mean, we're texting, we're emailing, we're sending emojis to express our emotions, etc. No question about that. But even in modern dating services, you know, I'm chief scientific advisor to Match.com, and I keep telling the president, and she agrees with me, that this is not a dating service. This is an introducing service. Once you actually meet somebody in the bar, on the park bench, wherever, your ancient human brain clicks into action, and you court the way we always have. You smile the way we always have. You laugh the way we always have. You parade the way you always have. You listen the way you always have. So, I mean, when you really think about modern technology, is it that dramatic? I mean, going back to the late 1940s and the early 1950s, you know, the introduction of the wide use of the automobile. Well, suddenly they had a rolling bedroom. Now tell me whether that isn't more important than swiping left or right on Tinder. And how about the 1972 when we you know, legalized the contraceptive pill? Well, suddenly women were unchained from thousands of years of worry about pregnancy and social ruin. Now they could express their primal sexuality. So, sure, technology, I think, is improving things. I mean, you know, so many middle-aged people can now meet somebody. Well, I'm too old to stand in a bar and meet the right boy. These are enabling, it's expanding our social networks. It's enabling people to love at every age.
It's interesting. Relationships is what you study and look at in many respects. I remember distinctly a conversation I had with somebody as I was walking from a lunch in Washington, D.C., and he said, you know, in Akron, Ohio, they manufacture tires. In Detroit, they manufacture cars. In Washington, D.C., we manufacture relationships. And the whole city's built on relationships. Yeah. So talk to me about what you think are the similarities between, like, romantic relationships, business relationships. What are some of the interactions when it comes to relationships?
I'm just so glad you asked that. Recently, somebody pointed out to me that, Helen, you're not in the love business, you are in the relationship business. And that is true. As a matter of fact, what I think that we've evolved styles of thinking and behaving linked with the dopamine, serotonin, testosterone, and estrogen system. We're all a combination of all of them, but we have personalities. Anyway, these four broad styles of thinking and behaving. Now, for example, I think Hillary Clinton's very expressive of the testosterone, analytical, logical, direct, decisive, tough-minded, whereas Bill, I think, is very expressive of a lot of the traits in the estrogen system. I mean, he cries easily, he feels everybody's pain, whole world knows he can't stop talking. And matter of fact, you know, Americans are wondering when we're going to have our first female president. I think we've had our first female president. And I can understand why Putin and Trump understand each other. They're both very high testosterone men. And, you know, whereas somebody like the former president of China, Hu Jintao, he's very expressive of the serotonin system. Modest, detailed, traditional, conventional, follows the rules, respects authority, etc. And when you begin to understand the brain, you can begin to see political figures. You can, I mean, for example, George Washington was the right man at the right time in American history. And so it's opened a whole world for me, understanding personality. It's opening, I was never interested in history, actually. I was always interested in prehistory, the beginnings, and now I'm captivated by today. So
if you could have someone in this column, and they're negotiating a treaty, and the other person's in this column, is it easier to create? I mean, is it or should they both be from the testosterone, or does that create more conflict? Right. What you got to do is understand who they are, and then give them your perspective the way they can understand it. I don't think that any particular combination is necessarily most productive. But what is productive is understanding who you're talking to and then give them your data in ways that they can hear it. As a matter of fact, you know, we always have believed in the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. I think it's the platinum rule, do unto others as they would have done unto themselves, and they will hear you and you can win. Is chemistry or biology more important in a failed relationship? I mean, which contributes more? Could never know, you know. You never know these. It's very complicated. We're just beginning to understand the brain. It's all chemistry, it's all biology, and it's all culture. They go hand in hand. It's interesting. There's been these studies about, they bring couples in for couple therapy, and some of these people can be very good predictors. I know you know all this stuff, but But you might look at a couple and think, oh, well, they'll make it. And then the person there is like, no, because she said something rather dismissive. There's telltale signs,
Absolutely.
which is interesting. Talk to us about that in relationships.
Well, I give a lot of speeches to couples therapists because I come with the biological perspective rather than the cultural, and they are steeped in, and as well they should be, steeped in your childhood, your education, your expectations, etc. But there is a biological, we do have biological styles of thinking. So I will say, for example, the very high person who's very expressive of the dopamine system in the brain. They are curious, creative, spontaneous, energetic, mentally flexible. And they fall in love with the high serotonin type, who's traditional, conventional, follows the rules, respects authority. And at first they might really need that opposition. You know, the high dopamine person is grounded by the high serotonin person, and the high serotonin person gets the energy and the curiosity, the adventure of the high dopamine. But they have 2 children, you know, the marriage goes on, and suddenly the high dopamine person says, well, why don't you want to go off to the highlands of New Guinea with me? And the other one says, you don't get it, man. We've got 2 small children here. And so, but if you begin to understand that when people are in conflict, it's often, I think, having to do with biological styles. In other words, they have to realize it's not about me. You know, some people are stubborn, and they're not stubborn just because they hate you. They're stubborn because they're stubborn. And once you begin to really understand the full style of thinking, and you can learn how to reach that style, you can build a happy marriage. Now, there's some people that aren't going to build a happy marriage. They married the wrong person.
Right, right. Well, you know what's interesting, getting back to Match.com, because I know you work with them.
Yeah.
On the surface, it looks brilliant. I mean, it's almost like going grocery shopping in a sense. This person, they're a Democrat, I'm a Democrat. You know, it's, oh, Jew. You know, you go through, it's all these checklists. We're perfect for each other. And yet you bring the 2 people together, and a lot of times there's just no spark there at all.
Exactly.
Talk to me about that, because it seems like if you take all of this column and this column, they're perfect for one another, and in many cases it's not the case.
No question about it, because, you know, as I always say to the president, this is not a dating service. This is an introducing service. We can give you the various things that you want. The only real algorithm is your own brain. No dating service knows the intricacies of your childhood, the intricacies of what you're really looking for in a partner. We can give you a whole lot of people that might work, but you got to do the work of getting to know that person, and that we can't do for you.
Back when I first started in this business, which was a million years ago, there was like 4 TV stations, you know. It was real easy to go on the air and have a bunch of people watching you. Now I say you have to figure out some way to break through the clutter. There's a ton of stations. You can go on the internet. There's a zillion sites. You can probably date a million people. How do you break through the clutter and find that perfect person for you?
It's a really important question, because the one problem with all of these dating services, and they know it, is what we call the paradox of choice, or cognitive overload. You know, the human brain is not built to shuffle through 1,000 different alternatives. And they know that the more alternatives you have, the less likely you are to choose any. And so what I say to people, I'm studying this right now from reading the literature. There seems to be a sweet spot in the human brain. You can cope with about 5 to 9 alternatives. And after that, it's cognitive overload. You end up you're swamped and you choose nothing. So one of the things that I say to people who are in the dating world, you know, stop. After you've got 9 okay alternatives, stop. And stop switching left and right. Stop going on Match or anywhere else, and get to know one of these people better. You got to give people a chance. We're just not built for this huge abundance of alternatives. So pull it back and focus on some. That brain circuitry for romantic love is like a sleeping cat. It's going to wake up, and you're off to the races in love.
One final question. For somebody who's watching this because they're surfing around and they're heartbroken, their girlfriend or boyfriend just broke up with them yesterday, what advice would you give them?
It's an addiction. There's somebody camping in your head. You got to get them out, treat it as an addiction, throw out the cards and letters, don't write, don't call, no drama, go do things with friends and relatives. The one thing that we've learned about the brain that's really important to me is that time does heal. There's a brain region linked with feelings of attachment, and the farther you get away from that person, the less and less activity you're going to find in that region. So you will heal. Give it time. But don't keep traumatizing yourself by calling, by writing, by texting. You know, if you want to get over alcoholism, you don't keep a bottle of vodka on your desk. Get rid of the reminders of this person. If they want to be your best friend, say, I'll love to be your best friend in 3 years after I get this over with, and find somebody new. But just don't keep trying. Get out there and find somebody else. You want somebody who loves you.
You mentioned time does heal, and eventually we run out of time. So thank you so much for talking to us. It's been fascinating.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with this week's Full Frame Close-Up. Mira Bloom's career had been carved out as a professional and successful actress, but in 2005 she was struck with a life-threatening disease. While healing, Bloom started a hobby creating handbags. This hobby quickly turned into a successful business, and some of her first clients were celebrities like Eva Mendes and Jessica Alba. In 2015, Bloom's mother passed away after a long battle with cancer. But before she passed, mother and daughter began a collaboration to incorporate Lori Bloom's paintings into Mira Bloom's handbags, creating a lasting connection that pays tribute to Mira's mother and the life lessons she's instilled in her daughter.
I really seek to create something beautiful and from my heart and really authentic and with value and substance. I'm especially interested in what the innate skills of a land are, what the people have been doing for generations and what's been passed down to them, and then working with that and giving it my own twist and something more. It doesn't have to be modern, but modern in the sense that, you know, we would use it today.
Okay, should we put it over there?
Yeah.
Okay. If we have this blue window attached.
It's often really difficult, and I feel bad for the artisans that I work with because I'm always asking them to make impossible things.
Actually, do we have another goal?
Yeah, for this size.
That'd be pretty.
You thinking?
Yeah.
I can make it look beautiful, but let's make it functional and strong and durable, and then we'll work backwards. I always wanted to go to India. Since I was a little girl, I would beg my mom, when can we go, when can we go? And so finally, 3 days after I turned 7, we went for the first time. And it was absolutely magical for me. I met Mira, who I was named after. And it was there that I actually really started designing, in a sense. Mira gave my mom and I a gift and said, why don't you go to the bazaar, to the marketplace, and pick out some fabrics as a gift for me and make some dresses. It was so fun. We went, we found these fabrics, and we went to the little tailor, and I said, this is what I want. And you know, as a 7-year-old, I said, I want it like this and this and this, and I had my little design, and that was really my first, I guess, foray into designing.
Can Cabaret.
And then since then, I love traveling. I love discovering new places and landscapes and cultures and meeting people.
Indonesia dan bahasa Bali. Dan bahasa Bali. Yes.
My mom was, painted, drew, she was an artist her whole life. She went to Iran, and she's actually the only artist in history to have ever painted at Hafez's tomb. Every day she would go there and start painting, and the guards said, "I'm sorry, you can't paint here, you have to go." And such a little rebel, she just every day would come back and set up shop and just paint. And soon the guards fell in love with her because she's quite charming, even though she's a bit of a little firecracker. And they started guarding her, and crowds would start to collect around her.
This is the actual, exactly.
Okay.
And then before we get to those, these are my mom's paintings.
Oh, but this is the actual.
But this is the actual.
Okay.
Exactly. So this is her Rose and the Nightingale painting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this one actually. And it's all silk threads, and
This is beautiful. Really.
they do like the couture gowns.
It's beautiful. I love that. I have several different collections. The latest one is actually named after my mom, so that's the Laurie collection, which is right now Rose and the Nightingale in all different shapes and sizes, and again with the hand carvings with Meher Baba's words on them. Then there's limited edition. I've only done 1 or 2, all different paintings inspired by my mother's Poppy's painting and her Peacock's painting.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's how it is with all of them.
Okay, and next.
She loved the idea that her art was going to be used in my bags. But she's a perfectionist, just like me. We're both perfectionists, and so it was stressful to get it right.
Don't hang around and let your problems surround you. There are movie shows downtown.
My mom passed away on December 17th of 2015. I was taking care of her for the past 3 years of her life. Her cancer had spread, went into the bones, and I closed the store right before that. And I am really grateful that I did that. It was very hard to do that, but not having this store allowed me to be fully present with her. That was a really incredible experience, incredibly painful at times and scary, but then also really rewarding and beautiful, and filled me with so much love. And I'm eternally grateful for that. She was my best friend. She was my soulmate, like my other half. We were, really similar in a lot of ways, and we had a lot of fun together. I mean, we were like little partners in crime, and we saw the world, especially creatively. We really had a very similar sight in terms of colors. We actually would sometimes even get in fights. We created my store together. I did the walls and the outside the store this bright magenta, and the floor is this sea green color. And once we put our paintings on the walls, it was like we were just amazed. That was the exact colors in the paintings. There's so many things that I feel that I can do creatively to take her art and do, clothing with it, or, all different manifestations in the bags in different ways. I feel like I've got 2 souls, like mine and hers, inside of me, and we're like going on an adventure. I hope to capture and to give to people, not only through my work and my bags. That's really important to me, that people feel good when they wear my bags. And I put these words of love on the bags because I believe they carry a higher vibration. And so people may forget that they have those words there, but they unconsciously have it. And not only does it uplift them, but it uplifts everybody that they come into contact with. And that's really what I enjoy about living, is trying to be uplifting.
That's it for this week. Join the conversation with us on social media. We are CCTV America on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And now you can watch Full Frame on our mobile app, available worldwide on any smartphone for free. Search CCTV America in your app store to download today. Get the latest news headlines and connect to us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Weibo. All of our interviews can still also be found online at cctv-america.com. And let us know what you'd like us to take Full Frame next. Simply email us at fullframe@cctv-america.com. Until then, I'm Mike Walter in New York. We'll see you next time.